You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV. Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hello and welcome, everybody. It is special edition time of TV Guidance Counselor. As you may have noticed by looking at the calendar, it is Friday, not Wednesday. So that means it's a very special episode of TV Guidance Counselor today. I am incredibly excited to bring you this episode. As my guest is the one and only Miss Julia Duffy. Now, if you're a regular listener of the show, you know that I am a huge fan of her work and that Newhart especially comes up on the show very often. So it was great to talk to her. It was an absolute thrill for me. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. And she is in Boston to do a play. She is here for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner at the Huntington Theater. And you can see her in person as well. From now till October 5th, the play is running. Malcolm Jamal Warner of The Cosby Show is also in the play. So definitely go to huntingtontheater.org, get tickets, and you can see her in that. Or you can hear her talk to me right now. So definitely check out this episode. I'm very excited to present it to you. So please listen to this special edition episode, a Friday episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, the one and only Miss Julia Duffy.
TV movies made for TV. TV movies made for TV.
And it is an honor to have as my guest this week, Miss Julia Duffy.
Hello, Ken.
Hello, thank you so much for doing the show.
Thank you. This is really fun. I haven't looked at a TV guide in years.
Yeah, I think you and a lot of other people.
Yeah.
It's such a weird, outdated thing for how everything's electronic now. I've had a lot of people on the show who have never actually even seen one and had to ask me how they work.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
God, it's just so incredibly familiar to me to look at this.
Yes. Did you get TV Guide when you were on TV?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Was it weird to see yourself staring back at you and those sorts of things?
I don't know. That's the kind of thing you just sort of get used to.
Yeah.
I do remember that I liked when the new one came when I had my daughter and I was breastfeeding because you could do that and hold the TV guide and read it.
It was the right size.
It was nice and small.
It's a one-hander.
Right.
Yeah. Excellent. And so you grew up in Minnesota?
Yes, Minneapolis.
Okay. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Mary Tyler Moore country?
Yes, indeed,
Yes.
it was.
Did you watch that at the time?
Absolutely. We all watched it. Everybody watched it.
Yeah, it was a huge show, but...
Yeah, to have an adult show on Saturday night that was really good and clever.
Right. And set in where you grew up seems unusual. It's the only show
it
I can
didn't
think
seem
of.
all that to us, all that set in Minnesota.
Right. It wasn't the most Minnesota-y show I've ever seen.
They really weren't wearing enough clothes when they came in from outside.
Yes. They didn't really show the tunnels in people's eyes freezing shut if they're outside too long from the people in from Minnesota.
Yeah.
So, but I imagine that where most shows were set in New York or Los Angeles for the most part, especially in that time, it was sort of refreshing to see something that was supposed to be set in Minnesota at least.
It was very fun for people, and there's some kind of a statue or something downtown.
Yes.
Honestly, I've never seen it.
Yeah. Well,
when I go there, I should look.
You don't, I grew up in Boston and I don't see any of the touristy things. There's so many things here that people are like, have you been to the swan boats and this thing? And I'm like, you don't even think of it.
Right.
Because it's just here all the time. And are you an only child or do you have siblings?
Oh, I know. I have 3 older sisters.
Okay. So did they kind of control the television when you were growing up?
There wasn't that much on. The world was not aiming itself at young people at that time. It was a whole different economic model when I was growing up. So I would say for the most part, we would be interested in the same things because there weren't that many. They weren't conflicting with each other.
Right.
People weren't aiming it at kids or teenagers.
It was such a broad range of young people show, sort of, and that was just it.
Right. And like 4 times a year a movie would come out that was for young people to see or for kids to see. It was like that then.
So were your older sisters interested in performing as well, or is it just you?
No.
So you were the only one?
I'm just some sort of a freak in my family.
Well, we all are in our families. That's why we do perform. So did they stay in Minnesota?
Two of them are still in Minnesota. One of them divides her time between Arizona and Oregon. She's a restaurant owner.
Okay.
And I divide my time now between LA and New York. We've
Right.
become bi-coastal.
Which is the active thing to do.
It's something we've talked about for years. Our daughter lives in New York. Our son lives in LA. It seemed to make
Works
a lot
out.
of sense.
There you go.
So we decided to make it happen.
So when did you start acting? You moved to New York first to pursue acting?
I did. I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Okay.
And because I read a book when I was about 11 years old. It was one of those novels,
Right.
series of novels, where
Right.
you followed some twin girls and their
Okay, like the Bobbsey
adventures.
twins.
Yeah, it was like that, but a little bit older. And one of them went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Right.
She wanted to be an actress. You sort of followed what they did after high school.
Right.
So I sent in for a brochure, and it came in the mail, and I was very excited. I remembered I changed out of my school clothes into something else when it came in the mail. I don't know what.
Just to have the
Just
right
to
outfit
read
on
it, to have
read
on the
it?
right outfit to read, and as if I were in the novel.
Right.
And sat on the front steps and read the
The
brochure
brochure.
and decided that that's where I would go.
Did you talk to, when you went there, did you talk to anyone else who had just heard of it through the novel?
No, I never met anyone who stumbled across it that
How did you
way.
hear about us? The novel. It's and so was that the first time you'd been to New York when you went to visit that school?
Well, I went to audition,
Okay.
because you have to audition, so I
Right.
did
you did.
that.
And what was that? I mean, that must have been very different from your experience in the Midwest.
Well, I had been to auditions there because
Okay.
I did a lot of community theater, which
Okay.
was actually pretty competitive and done at a rather high level.
Right.
Minneapolis is a big theater town.
Yep.
Every single suburb had its own community theater.
Oh, wow.
There's really a lot of it. It was amazing. The professional world of theater was impossible for locals to crack.
Right.
But there was a lot of that. So I knew what I wanted to do, and I had my monologues ready, and it was
Right.
just in the director's office.
Right.
It was as
So you-
simple as that.
And so theater was what you wanted to do. Do you have any aspirations to be on television, or were you just saying, I want to act, and it doesn't matter kind of what it is?
I never thought about being on television or in movies. I didn't know how to relate to that.
Right.
But I had done theater growing up, so I could relate to that.
Right.
And I would see theater on TV sometimes.
Which they showed a lot.
They did. They would show it. They would do it for television or on some variety show or something.
Yes.
They would do a scene, even from a straight drama.
Yes.
And I saw Julie Harris do Nora in A Doll's House, I think. I saw amazing things on TV.
Yeah, it's something that's really kind of gone away. I mean, we had that, what was it, not Gone with the Wind, The Sound of Music recently.
Oh,
that
I
was,
didn't see it.
I mean, it was a spectacle more than anything else. It wasn't sort of the filmed plays that used to be on throughout the 60s and 70s, and television, people forget. I think that three-camera sitcoms get sort of a bad rap now because people sort of look at them as antiquated, but I think people forget that the roots of it were in theater. And so that's sort
Yes.
of the hybrid that
A multiple
existed.
camera sitcom in front of a live audience feels much more like theater than any single camera show you would ever do.
Right, right. And I imagine it's produced pretty much exactly like theater, and you do it like a live
You rehearse
show.
all week, and there's rewrites all
Right.
week. Sometimes really a lot of rewrites
Yes,
a whole
yeah.
week. That's a little different from theater, and then you sort of have to split that difference. You are doing
Right.
it for camera, but you have the audience there for a reason.
So it's a unique skill. It's kind of not one thing or the other. It's sort of somewhere
It's
in
a
the middle.
little bit its own art form, but I would say it feels more like theater than it feels like film.
Right, because there are people there watching you
Yes,
that are
and
not
also
on the crew.
the editor doesn't decide what's funny in
Right.
a multiple camera show. The
Right.
actors really have to make the scene work
Right.
in real time. Whereas in a single camera comedy, the editor can really make
Right.
everything funny with cutting to the right thing at the right time.
Exactly. And you can add jokes that aren't there, that are cut-ins or
Yes,
flashbacks.
and
and all
I'm not
sorts
saying
of
those people aren't funny.
things. It's
but
cheating. No,
But it's cheating.
yes,
there you
it's
go.
absolutely
It's cheating.
So you moved to New York. You went to acting school. And what were some of your favorite shows growing up? You know, obviously Mary Tyler Moore, as we mentioned. But what were some of the things that you remember specifically watching?
Well, probably the thing that had the hugest impact on me was the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Okay, it's Mary Tyler Moore again.
And Mary Tyler Moore again. And it's funny that we're talking about it because where they've put me up here in Boston,
Uh-huh.
I have some below basic cable package on the
Excellent.
TV.
The hotel package.
And I can barely find anything worth watching. It's just bizarre. You can get all the evangelists, but
Oh yeah, well that's important.
they're all there.
Yeah.
All those channels. And so I keep getting these same few channels over and over again. And the Dick Van Dyke Show
Yes.
was on, and I watched 2 in a row the other night. And now, I mean, do you realize how long it's been since I've seen one? And I look at it now with all the years I've done sitcoms and all the comedy writers that I've worked with and have known. And I see why it got mentioned over and over again
Yeah, it holds
in
up,
the writing
absolutely.
room as a template.
Yeah.
I was so impressed. Certain things are dated, but you're still so impressed when you understand sitcom land
Right.
and those kind of scripts and how to develop those characters and a story. It was just beautifully done. I was laughing. Everything was real and made sense, and everybody's motivation followed a logical course, and it built and built and built. It's a very impressive show.
Oh yeah, and their character laughs. They're not sort of shock jokes where once you know the joke, if you see it again,
Yeah.
it doesn't have the impact.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that, especially that model of sitcom, really relies on because it's more character sitcom than event things. I mean, sometimes you get very broad slapstick things, like I Love Lucy often does that, and Dick Van Dyke himself is
Yes.
usually the purveyor of that sort of thing on the show. But the character stuff and the dialogue is so key to that show, and I think people forget that a lot. So that was one of your favorites, and you actually, I think one of your first roles was on Lou Grant. Did you have a guest starring role on Lou
Oh,
Grant?
I did. That might have been one of the very first things I did when I went to LA. I had an audition for the part of a nurse in the episode.
Okay.
It said things like, "The doctor will see you now."
Right.
And I, for some reason, was able to see the whole script, which wasn't always the case. And then if you wanted to get ready for the audition, pre-internet,
Yeah.
you had to either go the day before and pick it up, or get there very early and look at it.
Right.
Until you became sort of somebody that people liked and were
would send
interested
you
in.
things.
And then they would send you something by messenger, but I was always running into town just to pick up a script. And I read the whole script, and there was this valley girl working at the counter.
Right.
It had something to do with a murder. I don't know what, I have no idea what it was. And she was being interviewed, and I thought it would be so funny to play her like she absolutely doesn't care.
Right.
And she finds this all so lame and boring. The valley girl type was
Right.
a new idea then. And so I read for the nurse, but I asked the casting lady, the late great Fran Bascom, if I could read for the counter girl. I said, I have an idea and I have stuff with me and I want to go in the bathroom and change my clothes.
Okay. Back to changing your clothes like when you got the brochure.
Yeah,
Very important.
back to changing my clothes. And she was one of the rare casting people who loved actors and was very creative. And she was very excited by the idea. So she told them that I was going to do this, and I
Right.
went in the bathroom and changed my whole look and read for the counter girl and got the part.
So you always, were you always inclined to do comedic roles? Because obviously that's what you excel at. It was that, because some of your earlier stuff, it was in sort of, you did some soaps.
I did, yeah. Well, when I first started, I sort of wanted, I think I was like every other actress.
Yeah.
I wanted to play Nina in The Seagull.
Right.
But it seemed like I could compete in comedy.
Right.
It didn't matter very much what I looked like
Okay.
in comedy, because the person who made them laugh was the person who would get the job.
Right.
So even if she was described as spectacularly beautiful, or, large-breasted, or some things that I just really couldn't quite pull off.
Right, right. I don't care how good of an actor you are.
In a drama, especially if there's any romance involved, they tended not to make any compromises in that way.
It's more looks than
Yes.
ability.
And it's a visual medium. I understand it. I didn't ever resent it. I got it. I understood it. But it became clear to me that I could compete comedically no matter what I looked like for the
And
role.
was that sort of a revelation to you, or were you always funny growing up and you were always the person who fit that role, or was that sort of a new thing?
No, I don't think I was the class clown or anything like that. But I grew up in an Irish Catholic family with
Right.
lots of witty people.
And you're the
so
youngest.
Humor was definitely
Yeah.
a valued thing. And before I left New York, I actually did a comedy on Broadway once in a lifetime,
Okay.
Kaufman and Hart. And that was very successful, and I played a really extreme character. So I sort of went out to LA very confident that I was going to
I can do
compete
comedy.
comedically, and hoped I could compete
Right.
dramatically, which I did somewhat. But my first couple of years there, I really think half the town thought I was a dramatic actress, and the other half thought I was a comedic actress, depending
Right.
on what auditions they'd been present at.
Right, right. And what clothes you were wearing at that particular time.
And what
Which is-
outfit I was wearing.
Yeah, and so yeah, I have this. I come from a very large Irish family as well. From my mother's family, all our uncles, and it was definitely like if you couldn't compete with a quip when necessary, you would just be destroyed. Like you had
Yes.
to have the
Very sharp
the
wit.
quickness and the wit, which was interesting when I was a huge sitcom fan growing up in Newhart, which we'll discuss in a moment. Is one of my favorites, but it never occurred to me as a kid that these things were written because you don't think there's
Oh.
people writing these things. So you go, I like this kind of humor. I guess you just have to be really good at saying the right thing at the right time. And
Wow.
so I really worked, I mean, not consciously because I'm, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, at sort of trying to see the right moments to say the right thing and timing and that sort of thing. And that's really informed the way that I do comedy now. But I don't think that is the best way to approach things when you realize there's a whole room of people writing these things.
Yeah, I'm trying to imagine comedy writers listening to this now and turning
Yes.
red in the face.
Yes, that poor kid, you had no idea. That
They just make it up as they go along.
yeah,
Don't
it's just
they?
a documentary here. That makes perfect sense. So was the catalyst for moving out to LA that play that you had done that was very successful, or were you just like, I need to go out there?
You just can't have done the business without going both places. It's
Right.
very tricky.
Right.
It's always been tricky.
Yeah.
Now, self-tape auditions have become a big part of the landscape. So
Skype.
it's not so hard now to try to be in two places at the same time. But then you just had to decide where you were going to be.
Right.
And if you never went to LA, you were missing out on some very big opportunities.
Right, all the pilot season and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So you did a lot of guest starring roles. You're on Love Boat. Actually, you were the only person I've spoken to that was on both incarnations of Love Boat. I believe you're on the '90s revival and.
Yes, there was a revival. I think I did 3 or maybe 4.
Because that show was huge. Was that the first huge job you can remember? What was the first, or the thing that really made you feel like, all right, it's happening?
I'll let you know.
Okay, when you get that job someday, I think you'll get there.
We never feel that comfortable. You
Yes. No, I sympathize with that. But I mean, when there were so many less choices for people to watch, there were fewer channels. Sort of everybody watched these shows. So like Love Boat,
Mm-hmm.
kind of everybody watched it. I mean, that was a cavalcade of stars would be on that show.
Yeah, but people in the industry didn't watch it.
No. And that's probably, if you're living there, that's what matters.
Yes.
Did your family watch you on these things back home? And
I don't remember. I doubt
Right.
they would have changed their plans in order to watch me on Love
Really?
Boat
Right.
before we had VCRs.
right.
They're not like that.
Oh, really? So what was the first thing that they really were like, oh, okay, she's really doing it? Was it the theater stuff, or
I have to ask them.
you don't know?
We're all pretty equal in my family.
Yes, yeah.
And it's,
Well, that's
we're
good.
4 professional women, so
Yeah.
I don't think they ever missed Newhart. They absolutely
Right,
loved it.
right.
And loved
So they
Bob.
have good taste.
So, but I remember when I was on a soap opera, I do remember my mom saying, honey, tell me when you have like a really good episode, because I can't watch that thing every
I
day.
can't watch it every day. Well, that seems realistic, I imagine. But the soap was probably very difficult because you're getting that's probably like almost like improv theater, from what I understand. Not writing the stuff
Some
that
people,
day.
the people who are good at it are amazing. They're just mind-blowingly amazing, because that's the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah, you have no prep time, basically, right?
You have none, and you're not in that place actors like to be, where you know the lines so well that they've become completely organic,
Right.
spontaneous. You simply don't have time to get to that place.
Right.
In rehearsing for a play, it takes you 2 or 3 weeks to get to that place,
Right.
where the lines you're not trying to
Right,
remember
you can
them, they're just
concentrate
coming
on
out.
how you say them.
It's a whole other level of memorization.
So the first regular series you got, was it Wizards and Warriors? Was it the?
I think so. I should have looked myself
Yeah, I think it was about
up
80,
to have my
81,
chronology.
1980 or so.
Yes, it wasn't the first pilot I did, but
Okay.
it was the first series
That
I
got picked
did.
up.
Yes.
That was a strange show.
Yeah, CBS, that show was so expensive. I was told CBS had never spent that much money
Okay.
on
anything.
a 1-hour show before. And I think that might be where they put it on Friday night or something. I
Right.
don't think they looked forward to it doing well. But it has this cult following now.
Oh, yeah, and it just actually recently came out on DVD for the first time.
Oh, it did officially?
Yeah.
Because it's unofficially out.
Oh, there's been many unofficial things. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Warner Archives recently put it out about a month ago, but I think it was only about 8 or 10 episodes, right? It didn't make a whole
It was
season.
8.
Okay.
But it was so funny. It was
It's
such
very
clever
funny.
humor.
I think that show was pretty far ahead of its time.
It really was. I mean, long before Moonlighting,
Yeah.
we were, actually, I don't know if I ever did, my character, but the fourth wall was being broken.
Right, right.
In that
Especially
way.
in sort of a fantasy series, which was odd to have on television at the time anyway.
Yeah, a
And
medieval
now-
sitcom.
Yes, yes. Like there was another in the mid '80s called The Charmings, if you remember that show on ABC,
That
where
sounds vaguely familiar.
it was very high concept. It was Snow White and Prince Charming in the '80s.
Uh-huh.
They slept until 1988. It was actually up against Newhart for.
Oh, okay,
did not
maybe
do
that's
well.
why it sounds familiar.
Yes. So Wisdom Warriors was a huge profile show, but didn't last very long. Jeff Conaway was and you played Princess Ariel
Right.
before The Little Mermaid. And then after that, I think Newhart was the next series that you got that was a regular?
Yes, Wizards and Warriors was running, and I actually, and I did a guest shot on Newhart
Because you came in as a regular in season 2.
in season 2, and I played Stephanie in the guest shot, but she wasn't Stephanie. I mean,
Right.
that kind of character hadn't been developed. She was more of a, a plot device. But
Right.
it was funny. It was funny stuff. And I actually did find out on the same day that Wizards was canceled, and they asked me to be a regular on Newhart.
Oh, well, that worked out
This
well
is the
then.
good news and the bad news. But I had adored doing Wizards and Warriors.
Right.
Don Rio was the creator. He was so fun to work with. And the wonderful thing about single camera comedy is you do get to improvise a lot, which I
Right.
love doing.
Right, because they're not worried about the audience sitting there and watching something be done over and over again or not hitting.
It's very easy to do, and it's
Right.
single camera. So we had a lot of fun, and it was, it was my kind of thing. But so I was sorry to see it go. But then, of course, I got the dream job of all
Right.
times.
Hey, did you watch Newhart before you were on it?
Oh, I did. When his old show went off the air, I thought, oh, damn, I'm never going to get a chance to work with him.
Right.
So it was barely on after I got to LA. I mean,
Right.
it was towards the end then. So I'd always hoped that some guest role would come up
Right.
that I could read for, but it never happened until the new show.
Because a lot of people forget that the first season of Newhart was not very different, but pretty different from what people think of when they think of a Newhart. It was shot on videotape. There
Yes.
was characters people do not remember from the show.
2 characters that they lost.
Kirk, the Minuteman owner, and I believe the housekeeper was supposed to be your character's cousin or something that
Right.
you introduced
Yeah.
in season 2. So by the time you came into that show, that's sort of the Newhart everybody remembers. And how much input did you have into what that character became? Because as you said, it was a plot device when it first started, but I mean, you own that character, and I think when people think of like a Julia Duffy character, that's sort of a Stephanie.
Yeah. Well, my input was mostly about, it was very important to me that she was unaware of when she was being snobbish.
Right.
That it was never deliberate.
Right.
Because then I thought that's an entirely different kind of character.
Right.
And the people who do that well and are funny doing it are people like B. Arthur.
Right.
But
That acerbic kind
I
of.
did not think that people would think that a very young girl who was rich would be funny being snooty.
Right, that world.
Deliberately snooty.
Right.
And it had to be an unaware kind of snooty. And that was something I kind of harped on in
Right.
the first year with the writers, because the difference to me was huge.
Yeah.
And I think to them sometimes when they were writing the jokes, they didn't quite see the difference. But that was the place where I had input, where I, kind of
Right, where
dug
she's
my
coming
heels in a
from
little
with
bit.
with her jokes.
But they came up, they came up with so many things that, I can't take any credit. They came up with the idea that she just assumed that she was so beautiful that it was difficult for other people
Right.
to
Yeah,
not
I mean,
be
that's
as
the thing.
beautiful. And I loved stuff like that.
It's
It was
almost like
hilarious.
people say the best villains think they're the good guy. They don't think of
Yes.
themselves as a villain. So in this case, she thinks she's doing everything right, and she's never
Right.
insulting anybody.
She
It's-
always thought she was helping Joanna
Right.
when she would point out how tacky she looked.
Right,
She was
my-
really trying to be helpful because she came from a place where she knew much better.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all helpful. My favorite Joanna Barb that Stephanie had was in the Halloween episode where George is dressed as the Cowardly Lion, and he goes, "Guess what I am?" And you say, "Joanna."
I didn't
It's got this
remember
big-
that.
It's very, very funny. So that show went for another 8 seasons that you were on, and it got increasingly more and more bizarre.
I know, people talk about that a lot. It didn't so much seem that way to me at the time.
Right.
But I guess it did. And I guess that sort of happens when you start feeling like you're repeating yourself.
Right.
Even if you aren't repeating yourself, it feels that way. After all, we were doing those scenes 5 days in a row. The audience only saw it once.
Right, it's once, right.
We're doing it over and over, and you start to feel that way. And then you start to want to put some sort of spin on it.
Right.
And,
so it's sort of amuse yourself.
We had some writers who were a little more wacky, a little more whimsical.
Right, like David Merkin came in towards the end, I think.
And he's very out there.
Right.
Very funny writer.
Mary Gross, who later went on to write for Get a Life, which was a very strange show.
Oh, yeah.
Marjorie Gross or Mary Gross? Marjorie.
Marjorie, yes.
Marjorie Gross.
She was great. And they were all great, and I love doing that sometimes. But now I see why people say that. That's not very Bob, really.
Right.
And but I think it's fine that it did that sometimes.
I mean, I personally actually prefer Newhart to the Bob Newhart Show because I enjoy the completely different vibe that it has to the Newhart Show, where by the time you came into the show, they sort of figured out what's funny here is Bob being a complete straight man and just everyone around him is insane.
Right, and they kind of like his group.
Right.
But there was more of it in
Yes.
our show because of the town.
Right.
And there were so many characters in the town. I mean, you didn't just have the patients. You had the entire town that he lived in.
Right. And he also wasn't in a position of power. Like when he's in a room with the patients, he's sort of in charge of the crazies.
Right.
But he's sort of the victim of the insane people in the Newhart realm and universe.
Right. And then he goes to work at the local TV station, and they all think that he's lame.
Oh, yeah,
putting
absolutely.
him down, and it was hilarious.
And then it gets very strange, like when your character and Peter Scolari's character's baby is the owner of the television station for the last season. It's left to the baby, and the baby's in charge, technically, of the station, and it got very,
now
very
these
strange.
are things I'm not remembering.
Yes, you may have blocked those out.
But we did that episode, but this was early on, The World's Smallest Horse.
Yes.
And only in a small town at a local TV station would they start a competition to see who had the world's smallest horse.
Yes.
Ending with some townsperson bringing to the station a basset hound with a saddle on
Yes.
insisting it was a horse.
Yeah, and it was very strange too to see a show set in a small town America, a rural sort of small town America that wasn't sort of a southern show that was sort of hee-hawing it, and it wasn't a New York or Chicago or LA show.
No, it was
Especially
New
so
England.
Yes,
And they had lots of attitude.
absolutely.
And
which is
they
my-
didn't like this upstart from New York, and so all of that was great. I mean, to me, you couldn't use the town too much.
Right. Yeah, and it definitely expanded further and further and further as the series went on, where you got, the towns, the mayor would come in and the police officer, and you just have this huge...
And the librarian, Kathy
Yes.
Kinney, who
Yes, who was on Drew
hysterical,
Carey.
but the guys all would become tongue-tied around her.
Really?
But this was a running gag, as if she was a babe.
Oh, yes, I remember. She was kind of sexed
And they
up.
would all do the same thing. Every time her name was mentioned, they go, oh.
Which is a hilarious, weird twist on it.
It made no sense, but she had this power of them.
That's why it's funny.
And you never explained why. It was so bizarre.
Right.
And I remember there was one joke about, something about, have you ever seen her do the dance of the 17 veils?
Yes. I think that's a Jury Duty episode, which is one
Was
of my
that it?
favorites.
I've worked with Kathy since then, and
She's always fun. I
I'm
love
so
Drew
crazy
Carey.
about her.
She's hilarious. Was it weird meeting Bob Newhart for the first time after you really sort of wanted to be on the original show and loved it growing up?
It's a little hard for me to remember the first moment now.
Right.
When I walked on the stage, I met Tom first. I remember that, who was showing me all around, ushering me around. He was so sweet. Yes, I'm sure I was very nervous about it because he was an icon. But I was dying to work with him because I completely got his... I just completely got him. I got his timing and his tension, and I got how a young girl
would work with that.
Completely fluster him.
Right. Which was the chemistry on that show is perfect. It's one of my absolute favorite ensemble cast shows. And
Me
it
too.
holds up, as well it should be, holds up just as well, if not better, than the Dick Van Dyke Show. I frequently watch Newhart still. And was there anyone that you worked with that really flustered you? That was sort of like, I can't believe I'm meeting this person? Or have you been pretty unflappable with these sorts of people?
There were so many people. We had Johnny Carson do some kind of a cameo on one show. I can't even remember what he did towards the end. And he's actually sort of shy in person. And that probably tongue-tied me a bit.
Right, just because it's Carson.
But when you have Rickles hanging around,
Yeah, that's going to make things a little bit easier to take.
Yeah.
Anything less than Rickles.
you'll learn how to handle these people.
Was he there frequently? Because I know
He
him
came
and
to the
Bob
show a
were-
lot
yeah,
on Friday
good
nights.
friends.
And oh my God, that man is so funny. And he's as sweet as a pussycat
Yeah.
person,
Right.
He's just adorable. But he's so funny.
Yeah, he just never stops. It's just like unrelentingly.
But very serious when he did a guest shot on the show. He was very serious
Oh, yeah.
about his role. And
And he did some very serious dramatic roles in the 60s, which was,
he takes it very seriously when he
Yeah.
has an acting role.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it's a B. Roger Corman movie, that Man with the X-Ray Eyes, which is a Ray Milland movie. It's actually one of his better movies, but Rickles has a dramatic role in that, and he's very, very, very good.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and a lot of people sort of overlook that aspect of him. He never got a sitcom that really took off, and he was in pilot after pilot after pilot, and for whatever reason,
I know, he
never-
would make a lot of remarks to Bob about, the fact that he hadn't had a successful series.
Right.
Bob has all the money and stuff
Yeah,
like
so
that.
Bob had a ton. I think he did a guest spot on his 90s show George and Leo as well, with.
There was a cameo episode that we were all in.
Yes, yeah, in probably 96 or 97. That was also set in New England. It was supposed to be on Martha's Vineyard, I think. It was him and
Jason Bateman.
Jason Bateman played
Yeah.
his son, and Alex Rieger of Taxi. Judd
Judd Hirsch.
Hirsch.
They
Yes,
were playing the two
was
guys,
opposite.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Bob's had a sitcom in pretty much every decade since the 70s.
I know.
So after that, you went to almost immediately. You went to Designing Women. I think the year that Newhart ended, 92.
Wait a minute. I hope I remember this in the right order, but your listeners can look it up. And see
Yes,
if I'm
yes,
right.
it's easy to find. Yes.
I think first I did Baby Talk.
Right, and you did the second season of Baby Talk, or you were in the first season?
I was in the first season.
And they changed the cast the second season.
Yes.
Okay.
They changed me.
Yes, and added Scott Baio, or was Scott Baio?
Yes.
You were okay.
George Clooney left
Yes.
somewhere in the beginning part of that season, and it was all a very difficult show.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to say anything more about that.
Right.
But then they, when the new producers took over, they graciously, or maybe happily, let me go on my way.
Right.
And it's better for new producers. If they're supposed to retool a show, it's
Yeah.
better for them
There's
to do it their
animosity
own way.
between the people who hang around.
They actually replaced me with an excellent actress, Mary Page Keller.
Yes.
Who was probably better for the role. And they did pretty well with it the second season.
And was Amy Heckerling involved in that? 'Cause she
No.
did it wasn't an official adaptation of Look Who's Talking.
It was not, because that's why they didn't use the title. I
Gotcha.
did know the story about that, but I can't remember now what it
Right,
was.
right.
The legal part of it.
Right.
But
George
anyway,
Clooney.
I had a blast working with George. I had wonderful actors. I had great twin babies, but it was
Sometimes it doesn't work out.
a difficult situation in other ways. And so I asked to not come back, and that was fine. And then I was offered Designing Women, and I know people thought I left to do Designing Women, but that wasn't true at all.
Right.
That's just how it happened.
Yeah, I think because Designing Women was going through a lot of cast retooling at that point.
Yeah.
And you came in as a very Stephanie-like character, in my opinion, which was good. And then you did one season of Designing Women. I think it was just the one
Yes.
season. And then after that, the next regular show that I think you were on was probably, I'm blanking here, to Designing Women, and then you moved on to, we're both trying to remember,
I know.
The Mommies. Was it The Mommies?
Yeah, or was it? No, I think first I did Social Studies.
Oh, yes. But that was half a season?
Yes, that was a mid-season show. So there were only whatever you do for mid-season,
Right.
8 or 9 or
Right.
something, 12, I can't remember. And then it didn't get picked up. It almost got picked up. I actually thought it was a pretty good show. Wonderful writers to work with, really nice collaboration, and I enjoyed it a lot. At first I thought, I'm going to be working with a bunch of teenagers. This
Right,
won't-
right. They
this
don't know
won't
what
be-
they're
I won't
doing.
like this. They were fabulous teenagers that
Right.
I liked, and I had a lot of fun doing it, and I really thought it was well done and well conceived. But it was one of those things where, which of the high school shows do we have that
Right.
we will pick up, and in the end they didn't pick ours up.
And that must be heartbreaking. Like when you're doing, like I imagine a lot of actors do shows where they go, I'm getting a paycheck, it's not the best show, whatever. But when it's a show that you really think is a great show.
It really had a lot of potential. It was developing very well, and just a terrific head writer, Nancy Lee Myatt. But in the one that they did pick up instead,
Is it Mr. Rhodes?
I think it was the TV version of Clueless. And
Yes.
it just went nowhere.
Yeah. So that was about 96, yeah. But had probably a brand recognition to it because there was a movie attached. So,
Right.
So then you did the Mommies, where you were playing a character based on a real person, I think, right? There were the two women who started as stand-ups.
Oh, well, Marilyn and Carol, who
Yeah.
are still my friends, and I see them all the time, and they are wonderful. I did a stand-up act
Yeah, it's like a two
in
women-
Petaluma, where they were from.
Right.
And it turned into this show.
Which was kind of an amazing story.
Full show. I mean,
Yeah.
like a 2-hour show with music and dancing and talking about motherhood.
Right.
And that show was funny, let me tell you. I saw their live show a couple of times. It was fabulous. So they based the series on that, and they had a character come in, I don't know, a few episodes into the first season, who was the perfect mother that made them feel like they were failing at everything.
Right.
I think she was based on a compilation of people in their
Right.
school or their neighborhood or something.
But a character that we all have probably encountered in
Yes,
our time. Yes.
the mother who does it without a sweat, and
Yes.
whose kids are perfect.
Their story was amazing. They kind of came out of nowhere and all of a sudden had this pretty successful TV series for at least the season that it was on. I
Yeah,
it
2
seemed-
seasons.
2 seasons. And then just kind of, people sort of forget about that show now, but it was a funny show.
Yeah, it was. It had a different set of writers the second year.
I gotcha.
And I thought it was really developing well. So I don't really remember what happened. I guess
Right.
the ratings just weren't where they had the expectation.
Do you just build up a tolerance to that sort of thing after a while, or every time is it kind of devastating?
Well, it is when you like the people and you're having
Right.
fun,
Right.
and you see some scope to the role. You can think
Right.
of
Can see
more
where it's
things that
going.
can be done. It's very hard to get the chemistry right.
Right.
To be on a set that's really cooking, where people are really in sync with each other. It's
Do you
pretty
feel
rare.
like Newhart spoiled you in that way?
It did.
Because that was
It
sort of the
really did.
first long-term series you had, and it seems like everything was just great.
Yeah, I mean, I really had some fun experiences after it that were different because I was, maybe playing more of an adult role. I was
Right.
working with people who were more my age, sort of a different dynamic. But Newhart was just perfect.
Yeah.
It was very funny. So artistically, we were being really stimulated and fulfilled, and the characters were growing all the time. And the chemistry we had between us was, I don't know what to say. We're 5 very different people.
Yeah, it just worked though. It was almost like a harmony where you have,
Yeah.
5 different notes and it makes this thing that's sort of greater than the sum of its parts. And the show was the rare thing where it did very well in the ratings and was critically very, very
Yeah.
well received.
You just can't ask for more.
Yeah.
And you have a relaxed set because Bob is not going
Laid
to do
back.
comedy if he's not having fun.
Right.
And Peter and I were really different people, but I barely had to discuss anything with him.
Right. Oh yeah, the two of you seem so much like a
We were
real
just
couple.
completely on the same wavelength when
Right.
it came to comedy.
Right.
And I've never discussed things so little with another actor. as
Just
with
kind of
him.
look at him and go, this way? Yes.
Yeah, we were just on that wavelength. I gotta say, probably everybody feels that way about working with Peter.
Right.
They probably all feel that it's as easy as falling off a log.
Right.
Because he always seems like he's improvising.
Right. He just seems very natural, even when doing very bizarre things on that show.
Yeah.
I'm a lounge singer now. I work in a shoe store.
Yeah,
all
he's
these
just
things.
so spontaneous.
Yeah, and I loved him on Bosom Buddies. I think that's sort of an underrated show as well
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people don't necessarily know about these days. It was him and Tom Hanks for 2 seasons. I don't know if you saw him on that at the time. I imagine you weren't watching a lot of sitcoms when you
No,
were.
I wasn't. I didn't really see Bosom Buddies very much before then. But a very funny thing happened when they decided to make Peter a regular, and we all sat down at the table for the first episode of Peter being a regular.
Yeah.
And we were about to start reading the script. Bob leaned over to the producers and said, "No, I meant the other guy on Bosom Buddies."
That's very funny. That's very funny.
That's Bob for you.
Yes, that's very good. I love that. And so you were in one episode of Cheers as well early. Speaking of Boston,
Yes.
where we're at today,
Mhm.
and in the first season, I think.
Yes.
So that was another show that also sort of had that same patina of Newhart, where it was critically acclaimed and did very well. Although that took a little more time to
Yeah,
develop.
it took a little longer, but it was definitely an industry show. So
Yeah.
it was a very hip show within our industry.
So again, leading to people in LA do watch it. It's sort of what the world is very different there from what the rest of America probably is paying attention to, which is
Really
why-
different from the rest of America.
Which is why it's probably very surprising to people what shows do well and what shows don't, who don't know how things are watched out there and who pays attention to what. What do you watch now? Do you watch anything now?
I do. It's been a while, and you're asking me in September when everything's
Right, everything's new.
rerun, so I have to think, my husband and I are mad for episodes on Showtime.
Yep.
That show is so, so funny. I absolutely love it. I was a huge fan of Party Down.
Yes, Party Down is very good.
Perfectly developed sitcom.
In both of those shows, Episodes is also as a UK co-production, so it makes sense here. I have a very different model than American TV had, where it's usually one writer, maybe two writers, and they do 6 to 13 episodes, and that's it.
Yeah. It's like Fawlty Towers, which is legendary. They're not going to do it anymore if they can't think of something funny.
Which is so different from the U.S. model, although it's changing now, which is sort of nice.
Yes.
But which is why it's even more impressive that a show like Newhart was pumping out 10 seasons worth of quality episodes.
I know. We had some years there. Some years are always going to be better than other some seasons. But there were seasons when we would say to each other, my God, these guys are hitting a home run, about the scripts every week.
Yeah.
Because we knew how hard that was to do.
Oh, absolutely.
You just expect some turkeys that you're going to have to push.
If you're doing
sometimes.
24 episodes in a year, they're not
We were going week after week without any turkeys, and it is impressive now when you look at it. And I think the things that are funny now on TV have become narrower.
Yes.
Where you can get the joke from.
Yes.
It's narrowed down to a certain kind of hip thing, a certain vernacular that people expect in comedy.
Well, I think people watch television very differently now. Partly due to technology, obviously, but also families don't necessarily sit down and watch things as a group, so things aren't presented to appeal to more than one type of person. They're very narrow casted, so they say, this is a show for 13-year-olds, or we're doing a show for 22-year-old women. And I think a lot of that is because they're able to get these demographics so much more, minutia of who they want to go watch the show. And I feel like, and this may be a false sense having not obviously worked in the television industry now or when you were doing Newhart, but I feel like it was more like, let's just do a good show and see if as many people can watch it as they will.
And the other thing is Newhart, always, every writer, all of them, every showrunner we had, everybody wanted it to be funny 10 years from now.
Right.
Nobody wanted to do a current joke.
Yeah.
And sometimes a current joke was sort of presenting itself, and there would be debate about it, because it wasn't going to be funny in 10 years, but it was right there to be done.
It's an easy reference and we can grab it.
Yeah.
But that show is pretty timeless. I think if you showed that to people now, they'd be hard-pressed to tell you what decade it was made in.
But I don't think since Everybody Loves Raymond has anyone tried that hard to do a timeless show.
I don't
Raymond
think so
has
either.
nothing to do with anything current.
Right.
And it will always be funny as long as people have tension in their family.
Right, which will probably be forever.
Yes.
I think people, it's almost the opposite. They want the most timely show they can have, and if it's big in the burst in one moment and then no one ever looks at it again, that's what they wanted. It's sort of that instant gratification.
But then you'll hear the same joke done in different ways on every sitcom.
It's the Twitter world.
It might be very well written and well done and come out of the character, but you keep encountering the same jokes.
Do you think we've run out of jokes, or do you think that it's just people aren't trying to
If we keep it narrow and we're keeping it hip and we're keeping it in some sort of current vernacular, then we're going to run out of jokes.
Yeah, so you're going to have to reuse the same. I think sort of as a culture, we just seem to be recycling a lot of the same stuff anyway right now, and that might just be my age, or I'm kind of missing what the younger people are into. But it does seem like there's sort of less innovation when it comes to comedy, at least on television necessarily. There's definitely some good shows, but we seem to be in a drama golden age more so than a comedy in the traditional sense.
It's true, but then when something like Episodes does come along, and I don't know if you watch Key and Peele.
Yes.
Well, I think these are the two funniest people on the planet.
Yeah, that show's
I'm not sure
very funny.
anyone else can even come close to what these guys do. They blow my mind every week when I watch it. I don't even recognize them sometimes, what they do.
Right.
I did an episode of it.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
They're such serious actors.
Really? They're very good.
No, it hasn't been on yet. It'll be on September 24th.
Oh, great.
The first show of this new season.
Do you like
sketches in?
You like sketch comedy generally? Because you didn't do much of it.
No, I would have loved to have done more. I never really had that opportunity anywhere in my career. It just didn't appear. And there weren't improv places on every block when I was a young person, and almost none in New York. So that was just never part of anything. But I love it. And I've done a few. I did The League.
Yep.
And that's all completely improvised, totally improvised. And this is written sketch comedy, though,
Right.
and they improvise very little on that show.
Do you prefer to do improvised comedy? Is that easier for you, or is it easier for
Well,
you?
you have to understand that when I've improvised, someone else wrote the story.
Right,
So-
absolutely, yeah. So you have something to
I
work
can't
with.
compare myself to improv comedians who get up there with an audience suggestion of a single word,
Right.
which my son has done a lot of. That's incredible to me. And
Right.
out of that, they make a scenario and build. When I've done improv, it's because they decided to improvise a scene, but
Right.
the story beats were all there.
Right, it's already there, and
Yeah.
they've done it as scripted once, and now let's try it this
So
way.
I could
kind
say,
of thing.
yeah, I'm good at that, but
Right.
but I understand
You have a lot
what
of scaffolding
I don't
probably
do.
up there. So
But
your
I
son
loved
is
it.
a performer as well. He
Yes,
does
and he's done a
comedy.
lot of improv and a lot of writing and a lot of animation.
Is that something you
Very
encouraged growing up? Did he watch things you were in? Did you not kind of let him discover this on his own?
There was no mandatory watching of their
Right,
parents
right.
in my house, but
But some people have the opposite, where you don't want them to watch kind of what
no,
you do.
I didn't care. I didn't want them to watch bad acting. That was,
Right.
I didn't care.
That's a good
I didn't care what the
instinct
rating was.
Right.
Just wanted it to be good. We watched a lot of comedy, and we watched Whose Line Is It Anyway constantly
Okay.
when they were growing up.
Yep.
And they adored it. And they both did improv in high school. They had a big high school improv league there in LA that's done at a very high level, and
Oh, I'd imagine.
they're taught by professionals. So that was really good for them. Boy, that'll make you get from A to B faster
Yeah.
than a million acting classes, you know? So he's had a lot of experience there, and he's done some acting, and he has a show on Mondo Media called Crack Duck, so I'll
Right, which
promote
is an
that one.
animated show, and is this sense of humor very different from you and your husband? Let's say, like, do you kind of look and go, I don't know where this has come from?
Kind
Or-
of,
yeah.
because his sense of humor is so out there, but I love that.
Right.
I mean, the wackier it is, my husband and I love stuff like that, even though it's not what we've mostly done.
Right.
But we love it really wacky.
Yeah.
And I love dark.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, it's easier to enjoy that stuff if it's something you don't do, because you can kind of appreciate that. Oh, I can't do that, or that's not in me, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I really do appreciate it. I've always loved it. It just somehow can't be too far out for
Right.
me, especially when it's sort of organic and
Right.
felt.
What kind of dark things do you enjoy comedically? I mean, Key and Peele gets pretty dark.
Key and Peele gets very
The
dark.
episode with the insult comedian, if you remember
Oh
that one.
my God,
With the burn victim.
burn victim
guy.
in the wheelchair.
Yeah, that was.
I was
Oh my
absolutely
God.
weeping, and
Yeah.
that line at the end, the tears, they burn.
Yes, yes. I can take it. That was amazing.
Those
Yeah.
guys are something else.
Yeah, but it's interesting where I think in the comedically now, and I see this a lot in stand-up, there are people who confuse darkness for shock humor. And I think that you can have, and the Key and Peele sketch is a great example of that's a pretty organic character sketch that has some really dark things in it, but you're not just laughing at the shock value of the darkness, I think.
They do everything organically or they don't do it.
Right.
Sitting in the makeup room next to Jordan, getting ready to do the sketch we were doing, was like sitting next to an actor preparing to do Hamlet.
Right.
He was really getting into character, and of course they did a whole makeup thing with him. But these guys couldn't be this successful if they weren't extraordinary actors,
Right.
both of them.
Right.
And then they have these genius comic minds, and they're so nice.
Yeah.
They're such nice guys. It all is, I'm in awe of them. I really am.
That's the best compliment anyone can imagine, I imagine.
I'm not in awe of a lot of people, but I
You are in
am
awe of them. So did you pursue them being on the show because you liked it so
No,
much?
I don't know why. I have no idea why they thought of me. I played their mom,
Obviously.
and Ernie Hudson played their dad.
Right.
And it was a family sketch about two brothers. You'll have to watch it.
I will definitely watch it.
September 24th.
Definitely watch
And
it.
the millions of times it repeats on Comedy
Yes, Comedy
Central.
Central.
You'll have
because
an
they
opportunity.
air the same shows over and over again. So you're watching that sort of stuff, and you're here in Boston doing a play. Do you do a lot of stage work still?
I'm doing a lot more stage work recently, and they actually a lot of dramas. I worked at the Pasadena Playhouse. I did Little Foxes and the Eras.
So it's kind of coming full circle.
It kind of is coming full circle. The roles are so much better on stage at this age.
Right.
And I don't want to miss out on that. And it just seems to be where I want to be.
Yeah, so you're enjoying it more than you would have when you were first starting doing theater necessarily.
Yeah, also, they shoot everything in HD now, so I thought, okay, I'm done.
Oh, that's not.
I think I'll do theater.
That's not true.
That makes you want to move on at a certain age.
Does
once
it
you've
really?
seen yourself in HD, yeah.
Is it weird to see yourself generally though? Did you ever watch anything that you were on?
I always watched Newhart. I watched most things. Sometimes
Right.
I'd wait a while to watch it.
Because you need that distance.
Sometimes I'd watch it and then I'd agonize and then I'd watch it again a couple of weeks later because the first time through, all you're doing is reacting to every
thing you hate about
angle
what you've
and
done.
You only see the negatives, and you get nothing out of it if you don't watch it a second time.
Right.
You don't learn anything.
But was Newhart something that was easy for you to detach from, where you could actually watch the show, or were you so preoccupied with what you were doing? Because I feel like that would be what a hell that would be to be on such a great show but not be able to enjoy watching it.
No, I did enjoy watching it, and it was interesting always to see what worked on screen. Just visually, the comedic aspect of it, you would learn from watching.
Right. So you feel like it's almost like watching football film to get better the next time
I
you're
would
so
have
training.
no idea.
I don't either. The weirdest thing, I'm not a sports fan at all, but for some reason I always use sports references as metaphors. I have no idea why.
Yeah, I think we all do sometimes, but I wouldn't even know how to use football. That's how little I know about football as a
I wish I
metaphor.
knew
I do
less
like
than-
basketball. I
Yeah.
could use a basketball metaphor correctly.
I don't know if they watch film and basketball.
But I can't do a football one.
Fair enough. We're on the same
But
page.
I will take your word for it if watching the tapes makes them play better.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard
I
when
would
other
not.
people have referenced this. So finally, what I do every episode is a TV guide is not just informative. It cheers and it jeers. I also want to mention you're the first guest we've had on who's actually been on the cover of TV Guide, which is pretty astounding. That might be odd because TV Guide at one point was the single most widely published magazine in the world.
Wow.
So, and at the time when you were on it, so you would see millions of it was everywhere. Was it weird to see your face on the
Well, now I'm
magazines
trying to remember what it was. So you've got this one here, which
Yes.
is Designing Women.
Yes, but you
And I
definitely
do
from
remember
Newhart.
doing that. And I know there was one for Newhart. And I know there were 3 altogether. And I don't remember the third one. I think I remember what the Newhart one looks like. I do have it in a drawer somewhere.
Right.
I don't know what the third one was.
But there are 3. We can find it.
Yeah.
But that must be odd to be on.
That's
these
odd
magazine
because it's not like I ever stopped going to the grocery store.
Right, you can't
and
avoid
it's
it.
right there, when you're standing still at the checkout line. So that was a little odd. I wasn't quite used to that.
Would people recognize you from?
Oh,
things?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, constantly.
What was the first thing someone recognized you from?
Well, when I was on a soap opera.
The soap, was it?
Yeah, in New York. So I was
Right.
already used to that. But that's different because they're very intense about
It's a
the
very
story.
unique fan base that the soap opera has.
Yeah, that's
And
a little different.
Yes, they think you're the character. I think more likely than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing when
Right,
people
right.
come up to talk to you about a soap opera. So after
did you
that, I
leave
don't
him?
remember when I was first
Yeah.
recognized.
Yeah, but I imagine if you're standing in the checkout line and there's 25 copies of a magazine with your face at face level,
That's a
people are
little
gonna
odd.
look. Yeah.
It
At
is.
least it's only out for a week. You just avoid shopping that week.
Right.
Right.
That's probably what I did. I don't remember.
We don't need to go to the grocery store.
I mean, it's not like I was one of the Beatles and people were screaming down the street after
I
me.
need to go out the back
I could
entrance.
handle it.
Right. But would still probably. I imagine people would speak to you as if they knew you, in an overly familiar way, which is probably a bit. When you're like, how do I know this person?
Well, yeah, because sometimes people will just go, "Hi, Julia,"
Yeah, like you have a name tag.
and
on.
then I think I know them and I'm not recognizing them.
Right. So you start going through your
So,
internal Rolodex, like, where
It's
do I?
It's odd to say hi and use someone's name when you're speaking to someone you've never met.
Right,
It's an
absolutely.
odd way to approach someone.
Absolutely.
But it happens a lot, and then I never know how to respond.
Right. Because it might be someone that you do know from somewhere. It's like someone.
It
it's like a
might
teacher from your kid's
be.
school, or it's just someone who's a fan and you have no idea.
I know.
Yeah. Well, you deal with it well, I'm sure.
Oh, I don't have to do it that much. It's a small part of things.
Right. So as you know, TV Guide, as I end every episode with it, it's not just informative, it has opinions. And it cheers and it jeers. So I always ask my guests, if you had a cheer for television and a jeer for television, what would they be?
Well, my cheer for television would be when it's at its best, it's better than anything,
Yes.
I think, because of the ability they have to explore something. I don't think any movie or play could explore the nature of evil like Breaking Bad did.
Right. Because they're a snapshot.
Yes.
They're not a lifetime.
This unfolded in an insidious way, and you didn't even quite realize at what moment at which well, I know what the moment was,
Right,
but in
right.
case somebody hasn't watched it yet, I'm not going to say.
They have the luxury of that amount of time
Yes.
to develop these sorts of stories.
And when somebody takes advantage of what they've got on television, as Vince Gilligan did, and does that with it, that's an art form that's up there with any art form you can name.
And even having the foresight to see an actor like Bryan Cranston, who is mostly known for comedic stuff, and go, this guy can do a pretty dark role.
Right. But you had to have somebody who didn't seem like they could do a dark role.
Right.
And then, of course, the most brilliant thing, I think, was probably casting Aaron Paul.
Right.
Which a lot of people wouldn't have thought to cast him in that role. And, man, just incredible. So that's my cheer for television when it could do that.
Nothing is better, medium-wise, than when television is at its best. And I imagine you probably have a lot of jeers, as many of us do.
I have a lot of jeers.
It's hard to even pick
my
one.
jeers have to do with what we were talking about. Being a little too hip, a little too current.
Right. It's disposable.
Using sex jokes because you can always get a laugh.
Right.
Instead of really doing some work.
Do you think television's
doing some real comedy? That has nothing to do with being a prude.
Right.
I adored Richard
It's just
Pryor.
lazy, though.
So it's lazy.
Yeah.
And I get tired of it.
Yeah, I mean, I see the same thing with stand-up, but, it's like we all thought of that joke, but we go, well, I'm not going to bother to say that. I'd come up with something better. But it's quick and it gets the reaction, sort of, but at the expense of, the rest of the show in many ways. Well, someday television may be better, and it sounds like your son is at the forefront of trying to make it better right now with his cartoon.
Well, I think so. He may go places.
Has he asked you to do a voice on it?
He has not. No. Hey.
Would it be odd for him to try to direct you?
He'd probably have no problem with it whatsoever. I think he's a natural. But,
right. He has a lifetime of experience.
We'll see. If it keeps going, maybe he will.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for doing the show. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here. It was fun. A trip down memory lane.
Absolutely. And there you have it. That was Miss Julia Duffy. It was such an honor to talk to her. She's so funny, and I'm such a huge fan. It was an absolute thrill. If you guys enjoyed that episode even half as much as I did recording it, then it may be your favorite episode of the show yet. She's great and so gracious and funny. It was just fantastic. So, you can see her in person, as I mentioned. If you're in the New England area or the Boston area, you have till October 5th to go see Guess Who's Coming to Dinner at the Huntington Theater, huntingtontheater.org. If you're not in this area, you could just listen to this episode again or plan a trip. Also, check out her son's cartoon on the web, Crack Duck. That's very funny as well. Or you can see me on October 5th if the show is sold out for some reason and you're in New York City. We are doing our live TV Guidance Counselor event as part of New York Super Week, and my guest is Amy Sedaris, so definitely check that out. And be back here Wednesday. We'll have an all-new episode. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes. You never know when a surprise bonus episode like this one will come out. And if you subscribe, you won't miss them. So thanks again. Be sure to email me at ken@ikenread.com. I love hearing from you. Go on our Facebook page, and we'll see you again next time on TV Guidance Counselor.
Some townsperson bringing to the station a basset hound with a saddle on
Yes,
it,
yes.
insisting it was a horse.